because, you know, that's a way for people to test out whether it works for them.
The trouble is here, I guess, if you leave farming down to purely market forces, eventually you end up with a fairly horrendous situation of extremely powerful buyers who are dictating how the whole industry has to work, and yes. You just have people forced into sort of fairly awful situations of having to chase economies of scale.
But that's one type of market, and the other type of market is the one that's sustaining some of the added value businesses that I've been talking about. In Gloucestershire, you know, Lower Clopton Farm Shop is my example. I lived for 10 years in a village where this was my nearest farm shop, and it's a beef and sheep enterprise, 500 acres, which is quite big for Cornwall, but for our part of the world it's not particularly big. But they happen to be located on a main road, and they made their own money. I don't know how, but they made to convert the barn initially to a farm shop. But they've been really good at building this network of local suppliers. So they get their vegetables from up the hill, they get their cheese from somewhere else, they get their local apple juice, they get their, you know, they're sourcing from more than 100 different local suppliers. And the business is incredibly successful, and it has a cafe as well. At the moment, that's not in operation because of lockdown. But even so, when you go past on a Saturday morning, you can see the queues around the car park. There is a real market there, and particularly if you have older people who don't want to travel a long way, they love the social experience of going to one of these places because it's lovely, and you know the people who are serving you. You develop a relationship with them. You can go and sit in the cafe as well as doing your shopping. You know, there are lots of benefits of that way of operating, and it's small scale. Yeah,
it sounds just like the old market towns used to be, which is exactly where the greengrocer sold the Cornish cauliflowers, and the butcher and the meat. They went to market. It went to the abattoir just up the road and back on the butcher's slab. And that was my final question was going to be that due to the EU regulations, a lot of the small abattoirs closed, and farmers very often say to me, if they want to, you know, take
I have an interesting story on that. In fact, you say due to the EU regulations. It wasn't due to the EU. It was due to people in Whitehall saying actually it's more efficient if we push people into bigger businesses because then the policing costs are lower. So they made choices. You had a way to choose how you implemented these regulations. And if you had wanted to save small meat processing, cutting and abattoirs, you could have done it with a different approach to the regulations. You could have said you don't have to be a fully qualified vet to do these inspections. In other European countries, they have this kind of halfway house of people who don't have full veterinary qualifications who do the inspections. Makes it much cheaper. You can think about how you do your cost recovery. If you impose full cost recovery on small businesses, then they find it really difficult. It forces people more into fewer larger businesses. So I think, I think we've gone past that generational change now, and we could reverse the situation by a more intelligent approach to risk-based regulation in these sorts of operation. And I think there is more understanding now within central government of the value of diversification and doing things local. And as a result, there should be more willingness to think about the appropriate way to apply standards to ensure that things are safe. We've gone through a learning process in that respect. I read some of the regulatory impact assessments produced by MAF in the 1970s and 80s when that regulation came in, and they were literally saying we don't want there to be lots of small plants because it's just too expensive to regulate them and to monitor them, and it's much more efficient. You know, they were talking the old industrialists speak, economies of scale. It's much more efficient if all these things are done by big professional operators. And the fact that that means they're hundreds of miles away from where the goods are produced was at that time not seen as important.
Yes, well, in the town where I am, the management of the market was the decline of the cattle market was well managed, and now they're centralising it a long way away, and farmers saying that you know, for animal welfare, and that they're having to take a whole day out of their farm to be able to go to market, and they don't like it. No. And they do keep having pop-up seasonal sales, and the same with the abattoir. It's too far away, and I think it's it's not the best progress that I really in our particular area, because somebody on the Rhine Peninsula, it's an awful, it's like driving to Penzance.
Absolutely. I mean, you're hugely challenged by distance issues in the south, in the peninsula. I think the more that it's possible to reinstate some of these small scale and medium scale middle people in food supply chains, the better it will be for Cornwall.
Okay, Jane, thank you very much indeed for those.
No, thank you. I'm sorry about my phone again. I think that's 7 times it's rung this afternoon.
My she keeps pinging at me from Teams, so I apologise for that.
You probably don't want to be up in view because we've got a really nasty outbreak of COVID here, and it's just everything is kicking off in the background. But never mind, that's by the way. Janet, would you like to chance your arm at helping us with a couple of recommendations that we could consider as part of our programme?
Recommendations. Yeah, I think invest in analysing and better understanding business networks in the county. And thinking about the opportunities to strengthen those. And by networks, I don't mean the things that necessarily call themselves networks. I mean the interlinkages between businesses and how different sectors work in that respect, and getting a feel for which things are going straight out of the county in terms of the wealth generation and which things are staying within it and why. I think I would second what, and now I've forgotten her name, the previous speaker said about tackling the inequality issues and talking to an agenda that's about involving second homeowners and even the businesses that run the rentals in contributing to Cornwall's future, because it's in their interest in the long run. And then thirdly, the decarbonisation agenda is really important, and that is both the example I gave about natural flood management, building connections between communities and businesses and thinking about future proofing, and trying to find ways as a county of supporting coordinated local action with real funding. So I mean, LEADER does that already, but you won't have LEADER in future, and you don't know what you're going to get from UK Shared Prosperity Fund. If there's a way that you can kind of make something like LEADER, I can't speak with huge knowledge of how LEADER has worked in Cornwall, but I mean the LEADER model when it works really well, when you have stakeholders working together and a real clear strategy for a local area that people believe in. I don't think that's always happened with LAGs, but something like that continuing, I think, is really important.
Okay, Janet, thank you. I'm going to bring David Rodder in. He's just indicated.
Yes, hi, Janet. Good to see you. Thank you, Chair. So David Rodder, Economic Growth Manager. Just to give you some sort of assurance, Janet, but it certainly wouldn't hurt for you through your networks to push it as well. Our submissions and our thoughts into the UK Shared Prosperity Fund activity is that the LEADER approach, community-led local development, that bottom-up local activity, we would want to see a minimum percentage delivered via that route. Not necessarily just for rural areas, because you can have LEADER in urban areas as well through community-led local development.
Really important for the coastal areas, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've suggested in our submission a minimum of 10% of the programme ought to go through that route. Whether government will listen, don't know, but that's certainly in our submission.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Right. Okay. So, Janet, thank you very much indeed. We really do appreciate it. It's been fascinating listening to you, because we've had a whole range of different contributors to our process, and obviously having somebody sort of from your level and giving the input that you've given is quite different from speaking to a local fisherman. So it has been absolutely fascinating, and we're very, very grateful for your attendance and your time today. Thank you.
Please do come back to us if there's anything more that you want to ask questions on. We're a resource. That's all academics are, is a resource for other people to make use of. So please do.
Okay. So thank you from the panel, and a virtual round of applause. We seem to be doing this for everyone, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you, Janet. Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. from the panel's point of view now, we need to just have a few moments to consider the day's proceedings, but we need to go into effectively a private session. I think, has Janet just left us?
I've just stopped recording.